I watched him walk back to the kitchen with his hands shaking. This was his first night alone, no trainer shadowing him, no safety net. Just him, his section, and a table of 6 20-somethings who had already made him question every decision he'd made in the last hour. He was older than me, maybe twice my age, recently released. Trying to rebuild, and I'd been paired with him because I could handle the overflow when new servers hit the wall. Tonight, he was about to hit it hard. "They want something that's not on the menu," he said, his voice tight. "She says we have the ingredients, says the other location makes it all the time." I could have told him to push back, to say no. But his nerves were already frayed, and this was his first solo night. So I sent him to the kitchen. The cooks agreed. It was just a wrap, easy enough. That's when she started. Every single time he returned to that table, the woman at the head let's call her leader demanded something new. A sauce, extra napkins, different silverware. She'd wait until he'd just sat down. Another item, then snap her fingers the second he turned his back. I was watching from my section, watching his face grow paler, watching his confidence drain with every trip. I started covering his other tables, slipping drink refills into my rounds, checking on his booth by the window. He didn't even notice at first. He was too focused on that corner table, trying to anticipate what she'd want next before she could ask. It didn't matter. She always had something. I caught him in the back after the fourth trip in 10 minutes. "Hey," I said, "you might not get tipped by them. That's okay. Your other tables are fine." "I'm not touching those tips." He looked at me like I just told him the building was on fire. "I can't lose this job," he whispered. "You won't." But I could see it. He was close to walking out. This woman wasn't just demanding. She was cruel, impatient. She gave him no room to breathe. And something about the way she smiled when he stammered made my skin crawl. They stayed late. Past closing, last table in our section, that's when he came to me confused. "How do I ring up an employee discount?" I stopped. "Employee," that's when he told me. She'd spent the entire meal tearing him apart, telling him he was the worst waiter she'd ever seen, mocking his mistakes, and she'd been doing it with authority because she was a trainer. At our other location, that's why she knew about the off-menu items, that's why she expected everything immediately. She wasn't just some difficult customer, she was one of us. And she'd used that to humiliate him for 2 straight hours. "She wants multiple employee discounts on one check," he said, "and free birthday cakes for everyone." "She says there are multiple birthdays." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Prep the cakes," I said. "Don't bring them out yet." I found my manager at the host's stand. He was counting registers, getting ready to close the night. I gave him the short version, the demanding table, the constant requests, the way she'd tortured this guy all night. Then I told him who she was. His face changed. "See, our restaurant didn't advertise. We survived by word of mouth, on reputation." And here was one of our own employees from another location treating someone like garbage in our dining room. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I told him. He smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who rarely got angry, but when he did, it was surgical. "Do it," he said. "I'll make some calls." He took the employee numbers she'd given for the discounts. The ones she'd thought would stack, even though any trainer would know that's against policy. Then he walked to the office and closed the door. I moved fast. Half the restaurant was already closing down. Servers, bussers, the dishwasher, I grabbed every single person I could find. I gave them the fastest explanation of my life, what she'd done, what we were about to do, and why. Every single one of them was in. That moment made me wonder who else might recognize this feeling right now where you're watching from, and what time it is there. Because stories like this don't find people randomly, they show up when something already feels wrong. I found the new server in the back. He looked like he was about to cry. "We're ready," I said. "Let's drop those cakes." He didn't understand, not yet, but he followed me anyway. The group that walked out to that 6-person table was the largest birthday crowd that restaurant had ever seen. Maybe 15 of us. Servers, cooks, bussers, the dishwasher still in his apron. We carried those free cakes like they were made of gold. The leader saw us coming. Her smirk was so satisfied it made my teeth hurt. She thought this was her moment. Thought she'd bullied her way into free desserts and discounts, and now she'd get her little song too. We set a cake in front of every single seat. Then we lined up, shoulder to shoulder, grinning like we just won the lottery, and we sang, not the normal birthday song. Our restaurant had a special version, a long version, and we sang it as loud as human beings can possibly sing. We screamed, in that corner, where the sound bounced off the walls and came back twice as loud. Their smiles dropped in seconds. Hands shot up to cover ears. One guy actually flinched. The leader's face went from smug to shocked to something close to pain. But we didn't stop. We kept going, verse after verse, smiling the whole time. My ears were ringing, I know theirs were worse. We were so close to them, packed into that corner, and the acoustics turned our voices into a weapon. Every note felt like it was drilling into their skulls. I could see Leader trying to maintain composure, trying to keep that smirk, but her eyes were watering. Not from emotion, from pain. We held the final note longer than we'd ever held it before. Then we clapped, enthusiastically, like they'd just accomplished something incredible. "Enjoy your cakes," I said brightly. The new server stood behind us watching. I could see the confusion on his face starting to shift into something else, something like hope. The leader's voice was tight when she asked for the check, professional, controlled. But I could hear the edge underneath. She wasn't smiling anymore. "Of course," I said, "I'll get that right for you." I walked to the host's stand. My manager was waiting there, phone in hand. He nodded at me. "Her manager's on the line," he said quietly. "And I already called the GM." The GM was one step below the owner. In a small company with only a few locations, that meant something. That meant decisions got made fast. I printed the check, full price, no discounts, not a single one. When I brought it to the table, the leader's face changed. She looked at the total, then at me. "Where are my employee discounts?" "I'm sorry," I said, keeping my voice sweet. "Those can't be stacked, company policy." "I know company policy," she snapped. "I'm a trainer." "Just give me one discount then." "I need to check with my manager," I said. I walked back to the host's stand. My manager was still on the phone. He looked at me and shook his head. "No discounts," he said. Then louder into the phone, "Yes, she's here now. I'll put you on speaker." He walked to the table. I followed. The new server followed me, staying back but watching everything. My manager held out the phone to Leader. "Your manager would like to speak with you." Her face went white. She took the phone. I stood up. I walked a few steps away. We couldn't hear everything, but we heard enough. Her voice rising, her excuses. The words "I was just joking," and he was messing up everything, and it wasn't that bad. Then she started crying. She handed the phone back with shaking hands. Her friends at the table had gone completely silent. They weren't looking at her anymore. They were looking at their phones, at the table, at anything else. My manager took the phone, listened for a moment, then said, "Yes, sir, I understand, thank you." He hung up. The leader was still standing. Frozen. "Your GM has your employee number," my manager said quietly. "You're done." She opened her mouth. I closed it. I opened it again. "You can't, I didn't. He was a terrible server. I was trying to help." "You spent 2 hours humiliating someone on their first night," my manager said. His voice was calm, cold. "In my restaurant. While representing our company, that's not training, that's cruelty." She looked at me, like I'd betrayed her somehow. Like I was the villain in this story. I just smiled. They paid the check. Full price, no discount, no apology. They left in silence and Leader walked out last, her face blotchy and red. The new server stood next to me watching them go. "What just happened?" he asked. "She got fired," I said, "for being a terrible person." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. Because here's the thing about restaurants. About any workplace, really. Bullies count on silence. They count on people being too tired, too scared, too worried about their own jobs to speak up. They count on their victims believing they deserve it. She'd counted on him being too new to know better, too nervous to push back. She'd counted on the rest of us being too busy to notice or too indifferent to care. She'd miscalculated. The new server worked with us for another year. He got better, more confident. He never forgot that night, and neither did I. He told me once, months later, that he'd almost quit right there at that table. That he'd thought maybe he really was the worst server anyone had ever seen. But you weren't, I said. No, he agreed. I was just new. Word got back to us eventually, through the restaurant gossip chain that connects all service industry workers. The leader didn't get hired back. The GM had made sure of that. She'd tried to claim it was a misunderstanding, that she was helping, not hurting. But too many people had been on that phone call, too many people had heard the truth, her friends from that table. 2 of them came back a week later, without her. They apologized to the new server directly, said they didn't know it had gotten that bad. Said they'd tried to tell her to ease up, but she wouldn't listen. I don't know if that was true. I don't know if they really tried. But they tipped well and they were kind, so I let it go. The manager who made those calls became something of a legend in our location. Servers would tell new hires the story, always a little different, always a little more dramatic. But the core stayed the same. Mess with one of ours and we protect our own. That's rare in restaurants. In most places, management sides with the customer no matter what. Even when the customer is wrong. Even when the customer is cruel. Because bad reviews matter more than employee dignity. But our manager understood something important. He understood that a restaurant built on word-of-mouth lives and dies by reputation. And if your own employees are out there destroying people in your dining room, that reputation crumbles. The leader had thought her position protected her, though being a trainer meant she could do whatever she wanted, thought she could tear someone down for entertainment and walk away clean. She forgot that titles don't shield you from consequences. They just make the fall harder when it comes. I think about that night sometimes, about the look on her face when reality hit. When she realized we'd all been watching, that we'd coordinated, that her cruelty had an audience and that audience had teeth. She'd probably bullied other servers before. Probably used her trainer status to make people feel small. Maybe at her home location, she got away with it. Maybe people there were too afraid to speak up, but she picked the wrong server. The wrong restaurant, the wrong night, because that new server wasn't alone. He had me watching his back. He had a manager who cared more about his people than about avoiding conflict. He had a whole staff willing to scream a birthday song until their throats hurt, just to make a point. The birthday song became our thing after that. Anytime someone was being particularly difficult, someone would whisper, "Should we give them the full version?" And we'd all grin. We never actually did it again. I didn't need to. The threat was enough, but the real revenge wasn't the song. It wasn't even the firing, though that was satisfying. The real revenge was watching that new server grow into someone who couldn't be broken. A month after that night, I watched him handle a table of 8 businessmen who were drunk and demanding. He didn't panic, didn't fold. He smiled, stayed calm, and when one of them got too aggressive, he got the manager without hesitation. "I'm not doing that again," he told me later. "I'm not letting anyone make me feel like that again." That's what the leader had really lost. Not just her job, not just her reputation. She'd lost the satisfaction of breaking someone. Because she hadn't broken him, she just made him stronger. I've thought about her over the years. I wondered if she learned anything, if she ever looked back and realized what she'd done wrong. Or if she just blamed everyone else and moved on, convinced she was the victim. I don't know. And honestly, I don't care. What I care about is that server. The one who showed up nervous and left that night knowing people had his back. The one who could have quit but didn't. The one who turned that humiliation into armor. The restaurant industry chews people up. It's brutal and thankless, and full of people who think service workers are beneath them. The leader was one of those people, even though she was in the service industry herself. Maybe especially because she was. Some people climb a tiny ladder and immediately start kicking down at everyone below them. But some people climb that ladder and reach back to pull others up. I left that restaurant a year later when I finished nursing school. The new server not knew anymore threw me a goodbye party. Small things. Just the closing crew and some cheap wine in the back after shift. Thank you, he said, for that night, for all of it. You would have been fine without me, I said. Maybe, he said. But I wouldn't have believed it. That's the thing about bullies. They don't just hurt you in the moment. They plant seeds of doubt that grow long after they're gone. Seeds that tell you you're not good enough, not smart enough, not worth defending. The leader planted those seeds that night, but we ripped them out before they could take root. I heard one more thing about leader before I lost track entirely. It came from a server who transferred from her location about 6 months after everything happened. Everyone knew, she told me. About what she did, about how she got fired, and nobody was surprised. That was the part that stuck with me. Nobody was surprised, which meant she'd done this before. Maybe not exactly this, but close enough. She'd used her position to make people feel small, and everyone had just accepted it, because that's what you do in restaurants, right? You tolerate the bullies, you keep your head down, you survive your shift, except when you don't. The transferred server told me something else. After leader got fired, 2 other people at her location filed complaints. Things they'd been holding onto. Things they'd been afraid to report because she was a trainer and they were nobody. But once she was gone, once someone else had proven she could be held accountable, they found their voices. She'd created a small reign of terror at that location. Nothing huge. Nothing that would make headlines, just constant small cruelties. Comments about appearance, mocking mistakes publicly, setting people up to fail and then laughing when they did. Standard bully behavior. Except she had a title that made it feel official. Like maybe this was just how training worked. Like maybe you were supposed to feel terrible. The GM cleaned the house after that, retrained the managers, made it clear that being a trainer meant building people up, not tearing them down. Some people quit rather than adjust. Good riddance. I wish I could say the restaurant industry learned something from this. That workplaces everywhere suddenly started protecting their workers from internal bullies. But that would be a lie. Most places don't care. They side with whoever has the most power, the loudest voice. They let bullies thrive as long as they're useful. But that night, in that restaurant, we drew a line. And I'll tell you something else. That birthday song, the one we screamed until our throats hurt and their ears rang, I can still hear it, 10 years later, and it still makes me smile. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the bullies lose. Sometimes the person they're tormenting has backup they didn't see coming. And sometimes, the system actually works the way it's supposed to. The best part, she did it to herself. If she'd just been a difficult customer, we would have dealt with it and moved on. Bad customers are part of the job. You smile, you serve, you forget them by tomorrow. But she had to brag, had to tell him she was a trainer, had to make sure he knew her cruelty came with authority. She weaponized her position. And that's what got her fired. She thought her title protected her, thought nobody would care enough to step in. She was wrong. All we did was report what happened. A manager made a call. A company followed its own rules. The revenge wasn't clever or complicated. It was just consequences catching up. That's the thing about real revenge. You don't have to do anything wrong. You just stop protecting someone from the results of their own actions. I still think about that night when I see people use their position as an excuse to be cruel. When they think they're untouchable, because cruelty always has an audience, and eventually that audience gets tired of watching. I hope that the new server remembers one thing: he wasn't terrible. He wasn't weak, he was just new, and she was just cruel, and this time she paid for it.